Now, world leaders are expressing alarm after Israel's parliament passed that bill I mentioned, which bans the UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees. Israel has repeatedly targeted UNRWA during its war on Gaza. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres says he's deeply concerned by the ban. In a statement, he said, UNRWA is the principal means by which essential assistance is supplied to Palestinian refugees in the occupied Palestinian territory. There is no alternative to UNRWA. The implementation of the laws could have devastating consequences for Palestine refugees, which is unacceptable. I call on Israel to act consistently with its obligations under the Charter of the United Nations and its other obligations under international law. National legislation cannot alter those obligations. The implementation of these laws would be detrimental for the resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and for peace and security in the region. Jazeera's UNRWA has this report.
Israel legislates a ban on UNRWA, the UN agency mandated 75 years ago by the UN General Assembly to serve Palestinians uprooted by Israel in 1948. The legislation was proposed by members of Netanyahu's Likud party and won the support of a solid majority of parliamentarians from across the political spectrum. The bill prohibits the UN agency from working directly or indirectly in the occupied Palestinian territory and bars Israeli officials and organizations from having any contact or work with the UN agency. Nearly 3 million Palestinian refugees in the occupied West Bank, including East Jerusalem and Gaza, will be impacted. The consequences could well be apocalyptic, especially in war-ravaged Gaza.
The far-right Israeli politicians have been very clear that what they call Judea and Samaria, the land from the River Jordan to the Mediterranean Sea, is for the Jews, and by implication there should be no Palestinians. And of course, if UNRWA exists, the organization which the international community has created to serve those Palestinians, then of course that ethnic cleansing can't happen. So big picture, what I fear is that we're seeing is part of the ethnic cleansing of Palestine.
Israel has long advocated for the dismantlement of the UN agency, arguing its work kept the refugee issue, which it rejects, alive. This campaign went on violent overdrive in the past year. Politically, some of Israel's allies have warned the bills violate the UN Charter and Security Council resolutions and could jeopardize Israel's status at the organization. Meanwhile, some Republican leaders in the United States have threatened to sanction the UN if Israel faces any consequences. All eyes are now on UN member states and whether they will defend the organization from a precedent that could unravel its work worldwide or simply acquiesce to Israeli exceptionalism. UNRWA, Al Jazeera, Amman.
The international community has also reacted strongly against Israel's ban on UNRWA. Jordan condemned the move as a flagrant violation of international law and the obligations of Israel as the occupying power. China labelled the decision outrageous, highlighting UNRWA's crucial role in providing humanitarian support. UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer expressed concern the ban could make UNRWA's essential humanitarian work impossible. While the EU said the legislation stands in stark contradiction to international law and the fundamental humanitarian principle of humanity. Nearly the entire population in Gaza relies on UNRWA for their basic needs. Let's take a closer look at the organisation then. The United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees was created in 1949 to support Palestinians forcibly displaced in 1948. Well, that was because of the creation of Israel, known by Palestinians as the Nakba or catastrophe. Today, it supports nearly 6 million Palestinian refugees in 58 camps across Gaza, the occupied West Bank, Jordan, Lebanon, and Syria. As of last year, 545,000 children were enrolled in UNRWA's 709 schools. The agency also runs 140 primary healthcare facilities. More than 30,000 Palestinians work for the agency across the Middle East. UNRWA also encourages and supports the right of Palestinian refugees to return to their homeland, as stipulated in the UN General Assembly Resolution 194, which Israel rejects. Let's bring in UNRWA spokeswoman Tamara Alrifai, who joins us now live from Amman in Jordan. Good to have you with us. So, does this decision by the Israeli parliament mean that effectively UNRWA can no longer work in Gaza and the occupied West Bank if Israel is refusing to coordinate with it?
Good morning and great to be back with you. Yes, if these laws are implemented, the Knesset bills, then they're likely to prevent UNRWA from working in the entirety of the occupied Palestinian territory in the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, and in Gaza. What effectively this means is that most likely international staff will no longer have visas to go into Israel or the OPT. No work permits will be given to our Palestinian colleagues. No possibility to pass through Israeli checkpoints, meaning our trucks, our convoys, our humanitarian supplies will not be able to cross into the OPT, including Gaza, during this huge humanitarian catastrophe. No coordination on the safety of trucks, convoys, and their operations will be possible with the Israeli government. And mostly UNRWA premises, including or maybe mostly in East Jerusalem, will be taken over. So effectively, if these bills are implemented over the coming few weeks or few months, the risk is that our entire operations, services to Palestine refugees in the entirety of the occupied Palestinian territory will collapse.
Where would that leave Palestinians living under occupation and displacement?
The immediate impact is to plunge Palestine refugees inside the occupied Palestinian territory into deeper distress and dispossessions. In Gaza, UNRWA, the UN agency that is the largest right now, is the backbone of the humanitarian operation, distributing food, managing shelters for the displaced, and recently, in coordination with UNICEF and the World Health Organization, providing polio vaccination after polio re-emerged in Gaza. In the West Bank, including East Jerusalem, that we have schools, we have 45,000 children learning in UNRWA schools. We have health centers that give Palestine refugees full primary health care. These people will no longer have access to these services. That is an additional dispossession. And while I'm here, I was carefully listening to earlier guests, and it's true that besides the services that UNRWA provides, schooling or health services, protection, UNRWA represents the repository, the collective memory of Palestinian refuge status. So Palestinian refugees find in UNRWA the place, the entity, the UN agency approved by the General Assembly, the international community, that represents their 75 years of displacement and dispossession. And that is the crux of UNRWA's identity. Even if our services collapse, UNRWA will always be the representative of 75 years of refugee status.
Do you believe that Israel is trying to delete the right of return for Palestinian refugees, ultimately? This is what it's about.
The government of Israel has engaged in a very aggressive campaign to discredit UNRWA and delegitimize what we represent, Palestine refugees. So the vote yesterday at the Knesset is the latest, but also unprecedented act against UNRWA by the government of Israel and by any other government.
I understand, but do you see this as an attack on the Palestinians' right of return, that this is ultimately what it really is?
We see this as an attack on the status of Palestine refugees, seeking to erase that status altogether.
Chris Gunness, the former spokesperson, said he sees it as part of Israel's ethnic cleansing of Palestine. Is he right?
I don't know about Chris Gunness, but what I know is attacks against UNRWA are attacks against the international system, and that the heartening outpour of support we've received in the last few days by world leaders, close and far, including allies of Israel, speak to the centrality of UNRWA as an actor that defends the rights of Palestine refugees. And that is the actor of choice of the international community for the defense and the promotion of rights of these Palestine refugees.
Thank you so much for coming and sharing your thoughts on this. Tamara Alrifai, the UNRWA spokeswoman.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.